Doug, if you want to do an introduction and
Yeah, I
get
think
rolling up.
by way of introduction, I haven't necessarily planned anything, but if I were to, um, before we welcome our guest, if I were to think in today's world, in the world of the digital age and social media and all of that kind of thing, and I think about the term influencer, how that the definition of that term has almost lost all meaning whatsoever uh, in the digital age. And if I were to reflect on the true meaning of that term, and as it relates to our business and our chosen craft, I actually can't think of another person that I would be able to subscribe that moniker to than the gentleman who's joining us today. I can't think of somebody who's doing this in any stretch of the imagination as an avocation or a vocation who hasn't been, whether they're aware of it or not, influenced by Charles Fox. So I'd like to welcome Charles Fox for his first and hopefully not last chat with the Luth Group. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was, I didn't know who you were talking about. I can't, you can fool all the people some of the time, apparently.
um, before we get into the nitty gritty of things, and I know that you know the biography stuff, you know, you consider boring, and you really don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking biography, and I promise we won't, because that's, you know, that stuff that people who are curious can find out much on their own. There, in the lead up to this, in conversations with people, and especially people who are involved with the Luth Group, and you know, telling them what's going on, and if in conversation with other Luths, every time I brought up the name, oh, we're going to be having Charles Fox on to talk with us, everybody I've spoken to has a Charles Fox story, and it's not my liberty to tell those stories, and I won't repeat any of them, but one of them I want to get out of the way in the beginning because it's something that personally fascinates me. That you at one time were a professional gambler. And I don't know if it's my fascination with the idea of picturing you as somebody like Amarillo Slim or Doyle Brunson, like leaning back with your with a fistful of playing cards. But is it true that at one time you were a riverboat gambler?
It's true that I spent 2 years
Okay.
doing that, supporting myself doing that, yes. So you want to hear about that? Is that
Well,
it?
it's something that I've heard from more than one place, and I
Yeah, I know. It's nothing I've ever, well, not that I have ever written a resume, but I mean, it's nothing that I've promoted. My tongue slipped once apparently, and it's out there. Um, no, I'll spend a minute or two. I don't want to bore you with this, but there was a time in the '80s where I had been divorced and was just kind of, you know, reconstructing a life on my own, and I didn't have a lot of responsibilities, you know, children and home and all that. I was pretty free, and I wanted to make a living that felt really clean to me. I mean, I was building guitars and all that, but I never wanted to depend on that for a living. It You know, I tell my students, I mean, I came to do that for a living, obviously, but uh, I tell my students to do it for as long as they can for the love of it, because as soon as what's going on the workbench right now has any direct relationship to a bag of groceries, it's different. You know, it's not necessarily bad, but it's no longer the pure, beautiful thing in your life, you know, that you control. Anyway, I was a bit of an idealist, and I wanted to make a living that felt clean. Well, a clean living to me meant no customers. There was no one I had to be in a relationship with where I wanted something from them, which made me, you know, forced me to be manipulative. And I don't mean that I was some special monster. I'm talking about how we all live. But I was not insensitive to that kind, you know, what happens in the energies of two people when something's being sold. I mean, you can sell services, and it turns out that teaching is, to me, the cleanest thing I've found. But back then, I could only think of a few things, and I wasn't teaching at the time. But I could think, well, you know, you can be a prospector and just pull it out of the ground, you know, and that's done. Or back then, you could seal off your garage and install a lot of lights and you know, hope the law didn't find you, and you could grow pot. And it's not that there were no customers, but the customers came to you. You didn't have to sell anything, you know. There was no manipulation involved in getting rid of it. And you know, that has its downside as well. And the third and final thing that I could think of was the parimutuel system, which is what the horse races run on. It's, you know, the mathematical format behind horse racing. When you place a bet, it influences all the other bets and odds and what have you. I won't explain it, but it's the type of thing that any participant buys into, and no one is betting against each other. There's absolutely no interpersonal, you know, relationship with the others involved in the bet. So, and I knew that there were people who could analyze the daily racing form and, you know, systematically bet in a way that was profitable. And I just did that, you know, I studied it, and it's unlike it's not as though I was a gambler in the casino, although I spent a couple of years in the casinos, because the sports book in the casino is where you can bet on all the races across the country from, you know, the first race on the East Coast through the last race on the West Coast. And so I was in the casinos, and at times I would sit at the craps table just to while away the time between races. But I was certainly not winning money there. But the races, if you I won't go into this in detail, but simply if you see a pattern that wins, you analyze a lot of data, you see a pattern that wins, and whenever that pattern is presented, if the odds are greater than your historical winning average, then it's a good idea to be betting on that race. And you could, it's an investment. It's an investment strategy, really. Yeah, enough about that, but that's what you've heard.
Well, like I said, I think
Can we switch gears, and can you explain that in a little more detail? I'm trying to actually get out of Lutheran.
He's over there taking notes. I think some of that lends itself to the perceived persona that is Charles Fox, because you do cast a pretty long shadow in this business. I know for me personally, when I met you in last August, it was to me the culmination of meeting somebody who I had admired for decades. So, you know, and I don't know if it's the voice. I don't know if it's your contributions to this business. But let's
Thank you very much.
Let's revert towards a little bit of the biographical stuff, not so much as the story, because I've heard you tell the story before, and you characterize it as as to you a familiar story of, a young man who wants a nice guitar and can't afford nice guitars, so he built one. And that was when you talk about it, that you kind of stop there and you say that's the whole story. There's nothing left. There's nothing more to tell. And but I do want to dial it back, and I want to begin the conversation back in 1967. Partially because that was the year I was born, but that was also the year that the American School of Luthery was born. If I'm not mistaken, that's correct.
No. It was in the early 70s, maybe
Okay.
73, 74. Yeah.
Okay. So, so you had mentioned to me something about 67. I guess was when you decided to build guitars?
Yeah, that's when I built my first guitar. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
if a person asks, how did you get started? And I explained, I wanted a guitar, I couldn't afford it, I built it, blah, 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 blah. That is the whole story. That's not my career, but that's how I got started. That's all.
exactly. And I think that when you mentioned it as a familiar story to you, because the way you had described it was that's not a unique story. This several people have had that story. I think about it from my vantage point as somebody in a generation that's followed you, that by the time I was into guitars as a teenager, you could buy almost any guitar inexpensively and have a guitar. It wasn't, there was a more of a scarcity if you go a little bit earlier, where if you wanted a nice guitar in the 50s or the 60s, there were a whole lot fewer choices. By the time I got into the guitar in the late 70s, early 80s, you could buy, it was the Asian invasion had already happened, and you could buy an inexpensive guitar to play on and make music. My first guitar was a Hohner, and I often joke that I couldn't afford the F, so I didn't buy a Hofner. But
Doug, let me interrupt you. It's a little different. Perhaps I've said, and I think this general story, which I heard from so many other people, once we got to know each other, we people who began back then pretty much did it independently and didn't find each other in some cases, until, years later. But when I have heard that story, I can't afford it. But in my case, it wasn't literally can't afford it. I needed a guitar that wasn't available. And I would, so to that, let me I'll run through that quickly. But I was studying, let's see, I must have been 24 years old. And I was studying flamenco guitar as a player. I was in Chicago, and the fellow I was studying with happened to rent a space in a guitar shop, a teaching space. And it was on the south side of Chicago, up a flight of stairs, not a storefront thing. It was very mysterious the first time I went there. And it turned out that this is the purest chance, we would not be having this conversation, but for this, this chance. He happened to rent in a guitar store owned by Jim Sherry. And Jim Sherry was kind of notorious. That's why I use his name. Some people have heard of his escapades. But Jim Sherry at that time was the, I guess, pretty exclusive distributor in North America of handmade Spanish guitars. And so I walked into this shop and was surrounded by all these handmade Spanish instruments, among them flamenco guitars. Now, back then, if you wanted to study flamenco guitar in America, you played a classical guitar. There were no student models or factory models of guitars, and there was no one building them locally. So, you had to go to Spain. So you took a classical guitar and you hot rodded it and did your best, you know. But I wanted the real thing, and I could sure hear the difference. And I was surrounded by examples of just that. Well, put a pin in that and know that I was not long at that point out of art school. I had a master's in fine arts. I had gone to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And at that time, I was a painter, actually. Um, and so I say that because that kind of an education, which was still very fresh, uh, is an education in making things, in doing things with your hands. You can, you know, and the skids are greased in school. You know, you can do anything. It works.
Mhm.
It's all there for you. So that was very empowering. And so I was a young man on fire, you know, in the fullness of my whatever. And I had never screwed up at anything big time, you know, hadn't failed. So I looked at this and said, well, yeah, I'll just make one. It was so naive, of course, and so trivializing of the craft, you know, in retrospect. But that, you know, that got me going. And this store also, just because he was a distributor of these guitars, they had some materials there as well. Of
Mhm.
all things, they weren't a luthier supplier, but I think they had to supply material to the people that, you know, the dealers. He was a distributor, so they went to dealers, and for anyone who did repairs, they had to have materials available in North America to supply. So that was there. It was just all set up. It just had my name on it, you know.
Mhm.
I had never even considered making a guitar. Who had,
Right.
you know, back then? So anyway, it was
So
just
was
pure ignorance, but I did it, and that's how it happened. So many things had to happen, fall into place there for me to have had this life, which
Mhm.
I am so grateful to have had, you know. Yeah.
So I wanna try to draw a line because we don't need to get into the first guitar, second guitar, and you know all of that stuff.
No.
Um, but I do want to draw a line from that first guitar in
Mhm.
'67 or so to the beginnings of the American School of Luthery
Mhm.
and how you got from one place to the other. Because it's two things that occur to me when I was thinking about it is that now from this vantage point, if I were coming up in Luthery now, or if I was coming up in Luthery, you know, in the '80s, '90s, or 2000s, it existed. You know, that model of a career in building and teaching and the existence of a school,
Mhm.
whether it be American School Luthery, Roberto Venn, Gallup, that
Mhm.
idea of a business model to be able to not only perform this craft, but also to teach the craft didn't exist. It
Right.
exists now, and very often when I have a young guy is a friend of mine who currently works at Paul Reed Smith Guitars that started his career coming to me and saying, "Oh, can I apprentice with you?" And I said, "No." I said, "You know, people nowadays they go to school for such things." And he wound up going to a school, and then that was the beginning of his career into the world of lutherie. He builds his own archtop guitars and flat top guitars, and he works at the Paul Reed Smith factory. He did apprentice with me later for a couple of years in the repair shop, or for about a year, I should say, to be more specific. But the career path at that time of not only going to a school, or schools didn't exist for this. American School of Luthery was the first one. So what I'm curious about is for you to draw that line for me of how you get from building your first guitar to saying, you know, hey, I can teach other people this craft as well. That's what I'm
Mhm.
curious about.
Right. Well, yeah, I can explain that. From 67 until 1970, um, I built more guitars, but you know, I was doing other things for a living. Um, and there was no sense back then that this could be done for a living. Uh, it just didn't exist. There was no one to point to. If you were in New York, you might have known, De Kisto or D'Angelico or that. But those examples, or somewhere else, you might have run across Eugene Clark or Richard Schneider. But these examples were so far and few between that they really emphasized the,
Scarcity.
there was no exception. It just didn't exist. So it wasn't on anyone's mind to do it for a living. There was no market. There was nothing. But I did it for myself, and people do hear, your friends hear, and gets out. You're making guitars, and I did begin selling them, but again, I didn't know what I was doing. It didn't fit into any existing, stream of brokers, and I don't know, none of what we take for granted today. So it was pretty much something I was doing for myself until 1970. My then wife and children and I moved along with hundreds and, well, thousands of other people, I believe, back to the land. 1970, we'd had it with society, and we all did something about it. And we, like so many others, went to Vermont. Heaven, we did, and to bring our children up sane, And a big part of that was homesteading and just, a general rejection of life as a consumer,
Mhm.
Anyway, I had a job waiting for me there, though. And I became the art department at the Hanover, New Hampshire High School, which was just across the river from Vermont, where we lived. And Hanover is nothing but Dartmouth College, really.
Mhm.
And so the kids in the high school were the kids of educators. Everybody took a serious interest in the quality of the education there, and we were encouraged to be. The times were such that we were encouraged to be experimental, and so I had an open studio there. Where all the kids could come to do whatever they wanted, and I would supervise it and help them. And those that wanted it for credit would work out a contract with me. What would qualify as earning that credit, and they'd come up with their own kind of self-guided projects. And so in that atmosphere, I mean, it was very rich, and I loved teaching. I was a teacher, before I even started building guitars. So, I was an art teacher in Chicago as well. So it got out. I don't recall, the conversation, but someone understood that I also built guitars among the students, and somebody said, "Hey, I'd love to build a guitar. Could I do that?" And, that seemed like way too ambitious a thing. And it was. But, we built maybe a dulcimer, cigar box guitar. So we built a few things like that I thought I could get them through in a semester or whatever of time. And then it got a little more ambitious, and they were building, almost guitars. But I realized that, hey, this can be taught. I had to systematize it, enough to communicate to these kids, what they were up to, how to go about it. And I realized it could be taught. And that began my thinking that perhaps I could teach it to other people, not just high school students. There still were no books, as I recall. Maybe there was by 19 early 70s. But no, there was, no, I forget. But there were a couple of the older books, but nothing that really went into much detail or inspired. So let me go backtrack a little bit and just remind you that when and I'm just talking about myself and others who in the late 60s just had this crazy thought, I'll build my own damn guitar. There were no models, and we didn't even have each other for quite a while. So we each had to make it up. We had to make up a way of making guitars. Um, well, that was historically unprecedented. People had always learned from someone else who made guitars,
Right.
and passed that method on, and we're just really happy to have a way. It never occurred to anyone to get original about that. Make up your own personal way of doing it. But we were forced to do that and just draw from wherever we could. General woodworking, maybe some, I don't know, articles or peeks into guitar factories, and then I remember, I don't know in what the context was, but I do recall that seeing more than a little about Spanish builders. Maybe I was going to the library, maybe it was encyclopedia, I don't know. But that was the only model that was really well known to me, and I think most people back then, about how people went about building guitars. But as you know, the Spanish method is in some ways, well, I guess we find it eccentric. There's an Northern European way, and that's how we build, but I didn't understand any of that then. So we had to make these things up. So I had a methodology for making a guitar by then. It's nothing I follow now, I'm sure, it's evolved considerably, but I had to have that. And so I could think about conveying that to others systematically, teaching it. So I thought I'd like to give that a try. So I took a leave of absence after 3 years of teaching in Hanover. And so I knew they'd take me back if it didn't work out. And I put a little ad in what at that time was just this hippie rag on the hippie newsstands called Mother Earth News. Big deal now, but then it was just a little tabloid, sheet. And they had, what do we call them? Ads in the back. I'm losing my words.
Classified ads. In the back?
Classified, thank you. And so I just wrote a little ad. Couldn't have been more than a few sentences. It wasn't. Just learn to build guitars, 6 weeks, Vermont, blah, blah, blah. That was it. And, I thought I'd get some inquiries at least. But instead, it seemed as though I had pulled my finger out of the hole in the dike, and I was flooded with, there was so much pressure on the system, I had no idea out there. And the thing is, it wasn't that there were people wanting to make guitars and then they came across this ad. It never was that. It was they came across this ad and realized they wanted to make guitars. They discovered that it was possible, and many people, it's just not too strong to say they were galvanized by this, imagining this thing. You have to remember what the guitar was back then in the 70s. I mean, it continues to be something of a power object, but back then, it was to anything else, like to other instruments, like what a Harley is to other motorcycles, The guitar, the music back then, I won't go, you know your history of the 60s and 70s, but the music was just profoundly central to, the counterculture, which was enormous, by the way. And so, not everybody could play it, but you know, it had such significance that just to be around it, you know, meant something. And so making guitars just, you know, instantly a lot of people wanted to do it. And overnight I had a school. I had a school with more students, you know, I mean, I was in the evenings while I was teaching, I had a shop set up on our little homestead up in the hills in Vermont. And in the evenings, I would carpenter, you know, an extension onto the shop for more students. It was, you know, it was literally just bursting.
That's great.
So, you know, that was wonderful. So I didn't have to work at it, you know, I just happened to
Strike the chord.
do this thing. It could have been anyone, you know, writing that ad, you know, but so, and there were other schools very soon, as you said, you know, certainly the Roberto Venn within a year or so of that, I'm sure. And yeah, so the teaching of it became a thing in itself. And
Hmm. So you're still on sabbatical.
I, I wonder if they'll take me back. But anyway, yeah. So that's how it got started. I'll stop there. But that you did ask for that much, and
Yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
sure. So as a guitar builder, um, and you started this concept of a school, which sounded like it sounded like it ran away with you as much as you did with it,
Mhm.
fairly early on in your building career. So one of the things I'd like to just explore in terms of the school and the act of teaching the building of guitars is the concept of sharing what you learn,
Mhm.
which is something that is um, twofold. One, I think, very unique to our business and how much we want others to know about what it is we're doing, and how much the information is freely shared among luthiers. And I think that's somewhat unique to our business than other business. And in a lot of trades, there are these very closely guarded, you know, secrets, and there's all sorts of hierarchies of unionization, and you know, you can't learn X until you reach a certain number of years in the career, and there's all sorts of apprenticeship and journeyman and all of this type of stuff that seems like it's designed to keep people who are doing it protected from those people who want to do it. Whereas in our business, it's almost the opposite is true. You know, we're so eager to share what we want other people to see what we're doing that we practically want to give it away. So can you talk about that whole aspect of sharing what you know as it relates to teaching, and before we move
Yeah,
on?
sure. You know, I relate it to, again, back to the times. I think most of the people who began building guitars back then uh, were not necessarily all hippies, but it was definitely a step away from the conventional choices in life, you know, and how to put this? Well, back then, you know, we rejected, you know, so many things, and you know, the whole corporate, you know, I mean, citizens were being converted to their self-identity was as consumers, you know, and so yeah, all there was. I'm going to try to be brief with this. But the attitude back then was generally, and I don't mean in Luthery, but just generally in our culture, young people, it was not to be exclusive, it was to be inclusive. You know, it wasn't to be, um, oh, how to say it? It was very supportive.
Hmm.
You know, people, information was free. That was there were contexts in which that phrase was used. That was kind of a byword, or you know, whatever it's called. Um, and the luthiers who were part of that culture, uh, yeah, they were supported in sharing with each other because that's how they felt, you know, life should be. But also, of course, it was in, you know, inspired self-interest, I suppose. You know, you got as well as you gave. Yeah, I don't mean it was a tit for tat, you know, not at all. But um, you benefited from it as well as others from what you had to share. I
Hmm.
mean, we all, God, we were so eager to know what each other knew, and so appreciative that so that was, if we could be called the first generation, I don't know that that makes sense, but we we did it that way. And so a lot of people came into Luthery finding that in place, that attitude.
Hmm.
And I don't know what further to say about it than today people are so well supported in this task. Anyone who wants to build a guitar, just you know, you just go to YouTube and you buy any one of, you know, I think the bookshelf's about a book of really solid material, about a foot and a half now.
Hmm.
You know, there's no lack of information, and so people don't depend on each other in the way that we did, um, to know how to do things. And so I don't think I'm delighted to hear you, you know, speak of it as a thing that's still active, and I see that it is. Um, but I think, you know, everybody who pulls together into, say, you know, the Lutheran as an example, uh, shares that. I
Yeah.
hope they do, because I understand you have 800 or more people, and
Hmm.
if only 50 are giving, then a lot of people are getting a whole lot for nothing.
No, I think that embodies the spirit of the
Yeah,
Lutheran
yeah.
tradition.
I am sure that the example of those who are free with their information uh, has its effect on everyone else.
Hmm.
I know among my students, uh, you know, most of my students are middle-aged guys with careers, and they sometimes are shocked at how freely we give away information.
Hmm.
And every one of, well, every once in a while, someone will say, well, yes, because I talk about this in class. I have to. You know, I want to do my part to keep it alive, so I make sure people are aware that this is what's going on, you know. And I encourage them, of course, to be the same. But every once in a while, some wise guy will say, now, wait a minute, Charles, information's free. I paid to be here. You
Mm.
know, come on, like they got me, you know. And I explained, no. You are paying for my time.
Right.
You could call me anytime. You didn't have to come. You could have called me and asked me any questions you have. If I know the answer, they're yours. Sure. That's just my commitment as to, you know, a good way to be. But um, you know, anyway, I think a lot of people have gone home from, I hope a lot of people go home from this little week or two that we spend together here, um, confident that they could afford to be a little more like that and
Mhm.
not get eaten alive. Because in their world, you know, there's nothing to encourage it.
Yeah, well, we live in a world where, where major corporations want to patent the triangle or the rectangle. You know, but
I
so
think it's deeper than that. I think it's become, I think it's, you know, I hate to say human nature, but I think it's the way we are, and we have to work at being exceptional in not being that way.
Right.
And luthiers are in a business where they're surrounded by great examples, on all hands of people being otherwise, being
Right.
free and supportive, and yeah, that's wonderful.
I think there is a two-way street that takes place in Luthing that is somewhat unique to the industry, or unique to our industry.
Mhm.
You can go to almost any guitar show and see it where any luthier at any table is willing to show any other luthier in the room exactly not only what they're doing, but how they did it and what tools they used, and so much so that luthier that they're showing to, don't be surprised when they show up to the next show that they got a guitar on their table that has all of those features on it as well. So it's not, there's certainly a kind of a two-way street, both between people, who are as willing to share information as they are willing to take it. And I think that's what appeals to me about the community of whenever you're at a guitar show. And I go to guitar shows not because I'm not a guitar builder. I always consider myself a repair person who has built guitars more than a guitar builder
Yeah.
who repairs. So I do want to turn back towards teaching, because I want to hear your reflections on how teaching the craft has influenced your perceptions of the craft as a builder. Because there are a lot of
Yeah.
people who build and don't teach. There are a lot of people who they consider themselves too busy to teach or something like that. But I would like to hear from you in terms of your how teaching the craft has influenced you both as a craftsperson and a guitar designer and a builder.
Mhm.
You following me?
I do. Well, I believe I do. We'll see. You'll tell me, but well, it's a cliche to say if you want to learn something, teach it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so true, so true. It doesn't mean if you don't know anything, go ahead and teach it and you'll learn. But if you want to continue to develop and know more about the thing you're teaching, you will, because you regularly are forced through teaching to organize and communicate in a sensible, systematic way this information. And so you hear that yourself, you hear your own words. And quite apart from any dialogue that ensues, students asking pointed questions that you never would have come up with yourself. There's all that too. That's not to be discounted. But I think that just any craftsperson, once he or she knows their game, has no, unless they're teaching it, has no reason past that point to formalize it in their mind, to organize it, re-examine it in detail. And it's through doing that, through rethinking, that each time you do it, it's a fresh opportunity to see something in that you haven't seen up till now.
Mm-hmm.
See, one thing that I understand, I've come to understand, and only fairly recently in my life, I used to see so many people on YouTube who seem to be just, not know what they're talking about in Luthery. People presenting things that, it wasn't wrong, but, it was just that deep, And I would just have a standard, predictable attitude as a guy. This guy, you can teach on YouTube. You don't have to know what you're doing, and but then I don't know how I finally came to it. But at some point, I realized, maybe probably just observing my own myself, that what I'm seeing isn't somebody who's faking it, or this guy understands what he understands, and he takes that, perhaps mistakes that for knowing it, but he will know more if he keeps at it.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. I now see such people as just at a certain stage in their understanding. They may not understand that, but I understand that, they will have more to say about the same thing a year or two from now, perhaps, than they do at the moment.
Right.
And so anyway, blah blah blah. How does it? I think working with students has helped me a whole lot, because I have to design instrument features and approaches to, processes that can be successful the first time they're done. I It helps me understand the guitar itself. We make a neck that's entirely removable. It has two bolts into the heel, it has two bolts into a pad that is affixed to the underside of the fretboard extension. It sinks down into a pocket, into our C-shaped, neck block. And this thing happened just piece by piece, but in part because it's easier for students to do that. Well, it's easier for me to do it. It's easier for the world to do it as well. It didn't dumb anything down to create that. I just finished a class just yesterday, a 7-day class, the last 2 days of which are taught by Kerry Char, who's I know he's a member of your group, and an incredible repair person here in Portland, and a great friend. And the capper in his 2 days, he comes in and he shows all his standard day by day, the most typical repairs. And the capper is he does a neck reset. And I'm reminded every time what a gruesome thing that can be.
Yeah.
I mean, he's drilling, he's sawing, he's steaming, we're pressing, and oh my God. Whereas we just take a couple bolts out and it's off. You want to change the neck angle, which is inevitable in a fine, meaning lightly built steel string guitar. Yeah, it's going to have to happen when the top stretches to enough to make it unplayable action wide. And so we build a guitar that says "do me,"
Right.
But it's easier to build. It's easier it's easier in so many ways. But I think it's a superior. Not that I invented it. Dana Bourgeois has been doing things like that for forever.
Right.
But I do think it's an improvement in guitar design. And but for the students, I wonder if I ever would have gone there.
Because it was a
Because I was good enough, with what was.
right.
I didn't have to make it easier for me to do it. But I have people here who my commitment is it's going to work for you the first time.
Right.
You're going to walk out of here with a legitimate guitar,
Right.
which you have built.
Mhm.
And yeah. So I have had to understand things about the instrument that I wouldn't have to understand if my approach were the conventional approach.
Right. Well, plus I think also, and I don't know if it's changed for you over time. Currently, you're teaching your build courses, I think, 2 weeks. So you have 2 weeks to leave with an instrument that's an instrument, as opposed to, having 6 months to build a guitar, or, 3 months to build a guitar. So I think you described to me at one point where we were chit-chatting on the phone that, if you were to look back over the years, probably a 50-50 mix between people who are doing this just as an avocation of, oh, wouldn't it be cool to build a guitar? And a good half of them are people who are luthiers who are looking to improve their craft. And there's a balance between, those two different types of students. For the people who are coming in, who are just learning how to build their first guitar, how do you dispel myth from reality? Because I mean, we all know as lutes in this group that putting together guitar is, at least it's been described to me, and I think it's an accurate description, is it's an engineering student's nightmare come true. So when somebody's
It's a serious
building,
piece of business, yeah.
so when you have somebody coming in going, oh, wouldn't it be cool to build a guitar, and they have no preconception as to what it is. If you have a luthier coming to you to learn how to do their craft better, they have a frame of reference and they understand,
Right.
what's
Right.
behind it. How do you dispel myth from reality from those people who are just thinking that this is going to be like building a birdhouse?
Um, well, you're absolutely right. The job is to disabuse them of so much instantly because we got to get going. Yeah, and you got to be realistic. They walk in the door with all kinds of romantic notions, but that's what got them here. That's not bad. Okay, but now I explain to them now. Instead of being consumers, you're going to jump onto onto the other side of the counter with me, and over here, there's no bullshit. The bullshit is for selling, and you've been buying, and you've been bullshitted, and so that's what you have in your head, But here's the reality. But it's also true that as I've become, as old as I am in the last few years, I'm wearing down, and that's not a cry for sympathy, but simply to explain that a couple of years ago I stopped taking anyone with no experience
Okay.
because it became draining, just as you seem to suspect in your
Hmm.
question, that it was difficult. And so I mean, I don't insist that people have built a dozen guitars, but I no longer just have the energy to work with somebody who hasn't shown their interest, hasn't acted on it. There are
Hmm.
people who come in, and they would say, "Gosh, I've dreamed of this all my life. I'm so happy to be here." And well, they don't know the name of one part in the guitar.
Hmm.
And so I say, "You've been dreaming. What have you done about it? Is that your level of passion? That you not read something or wait?" And so yeah, I want to be able to. I need to be able to have a working vocabulary. If I spend my time at that level, just giving people a basic vocabulary uh, of the instrument, not only mean just names of parts, but a conceptual vocabulary. Generally, what are we up to here? I just don't have the energy anymore. And if I hadn't felt, a little weak at what I'd been used to doing all my life, suddenly became hard, I wouldn't have rejected those people. And, because it was a great challenge. And there are people who I knew would never build a second guitar
Okay.
without me, without this situation. They could go to another school and build a second guitar. But um, but once I knew that, my job became, and they're only be here for a week or two. When I say a week or two, the electric guitar class is a 7-day class. The acoustic guitar class is a 2-week class.
Mhm.
So that's what I mean. But it's a limited amount of time, and that person is paid to be here, and it's my privilege, they've I've given them reason to surrender to me. I've given them reason to trust me
Mhm.
and believe me. And so I'm in a position to be helpful to this person and see to it that they have a meaningful experience while they're here
Mhm.
through the guitar building task.
Okay.
And if that can be empowering in any small way, which is what I intend it to be, then they didn't waste their money,
Mhm.
and I didn't waste their time by, attracting them here and, you know, working with them. Yeah.
Charles, can I interject something? Do you mind?
By all means.
Sure.
Having
Yeah.
been through your school, um, I think the most daunting thing coming into that situation, having done woodwork for 20 years before I got to your class, the most daunting thing appeared to me the number of tools and jigs and fixtures and pieces that were necessary to get through building a guitar. And that, for someone who had never touched a table saw and a bandsaw and, chisels and all those, the amount of stuff necessary to continue on would seem insurmountable, monetarily, but also in collection wise. I have people walking to my shop all the time saying, wow, you have so much cool stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, 30, 40 years of building stuff, you end up with a collection of stuff. But if you're coming in as a raw nothing, looking at the amount of stuff necessary to continue would have been the most daunting thing walking into the shop.
That's absolutely true. And let's just complete that by saying that, as you well know, my approach to building leans heavily on the use of shop-made tooling devices, that are built to get this very specific task done. And so yeah, it's not just that I have a fairly well-equipped woodworking shop, but the jigs and fixtures, I hardly have room for them. As you'll see, if we have a little shop tour, they're
Mhm.
just in the way,
Yeah.
So a couple things to say about that. I don't know if you remember, David, but I hope you do, that I at every turn, my intention is to remind people of the relativity of how we're doing it here and why we're doing it the way we are, and be informative about how it might be done otherwise. Freehand.
the most the most sage advice you gave me during that 2 weeks, more than anything, and there are a ton of things that I took from you and have taken since, and we talk regularly, and I get all sorts of wonderful things. But one of the things you said to me that struck me more than any other sentence you said was that doing any part of Lutherie was doing Lutherie. You didn't have to be building a guitar to be doing Lutherie. You could be building a jig. You could be drawing a plan. You could be studying something. Any part of the job was luthing. It wasn't necessary to be working on the specific guitar to be doing luth work. And that set me on the path more than anything, because then I was free to just work on things regardless of whether they were attached to a guitar or not. It was building a jig or building a fixture or outfitting my shop to make it work for me was luthing. And that was a huge relief, in terms of, I got to build a guitar now I got to build another guitar, now I got to build I got it. Was more sitting on my computer learning CAD to do stuff is just as much luthing as
Absolutely.
building my first neck.
Yeah. And when you do make a jig to satisfy a particular need that you have, not exactly a jig that we use together in my shop, you're forced to analyze the task, in a very different way. And so it's not time out from Luthing to be building these things. It really, I think I'm positive that if my understanding of the craft has any depth at all, a lot of that's been lent to it by the kind of examination I do to make a tool. You know, I have to know how to do it by hand. I have to understand what it is I'm asking this new tool to do. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I do certainly think that if you look up the term Jigmeister in the encyclopedia or the dictionary, there's a picture of Charles there. Which is one of the things that I've always admired you for, because I'm a bit of a jig hound myself. So I before
Lots of luthiers, and maybe it's just, part of the mindset that's drawn to lutherie, but there's no end of luthiers who are sympathetic to, jig making and what have you. I love it. It's been said at least a bit in jest, I hope, that about me that I would I build guitars just as an excuse to make tools. Not quite true, but I enjoy that aspect of it every bit as much as I enjoy joining a top or any other characteristic,
Mhm.
thing at the bench. So yeah.
So before we start looking around the shop and peeking at jigs and stuff, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking, going back to a philosophical conversation about lutherie. And I've heard you describe, and I don't remember where I saw it. It might have been in something I read. It might have been something I seen. But I've heard you use the phrase or the characterization of lutherie, and you characterized it as the four realms. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Could you expound on that? What that's all about?
Yeah, boy, I hope I can remember them.
I can't remember where I read it or saw it, but it struck me as really interesting as a concept.
Well, but it's entirely it's just arbitrary. I mean, there's nothing written in stone about that there are four realms. But as a teacher, I find it useful to break things down, and categorize aspects of the whole, and so that you can look at aspects of it independently and then understand their relationship. So let's see. It's
I didn't mean to put you on the
I
spot.
am blanking, and it's more just clutching. I know it's right in there. Let me say too that the one thing I feared in this conversation with so many folks, here with us, is that I am last year or so I've begun to lose words. I I need help, it's part of getting old, and I'm gonna do something about it, but it's just a fact. And so let's see. There is let's see, there's the let me work it out for myself here. I'm sorry. You know what? Let's not talk about that right now.
That's
And
fine.
it'll come to me. If
That's
we
fine.
just leave it, it'll come, and then
Yeah, I didn't mean to spring that on you. I should have warned you that it was coming.
we'll,
But it was just
this is something that I could recite to anybody at any time. And right now, I'm just like a deer in the headlights, Ooh,
that's fine. That's fine.
it'll come.
You wanna start peeking around the shop?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So Sam here has got a camera, or he's
Yeah,
got, yeah.
let me get this switched over here. If
You
wanna
need to
pin-
change,
I have it labeled as Charles Fox phone.
okay.
Pin that.
Do, 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 do.
Okay, there we go. There's Charles.
Okay.
There you are.
Well,
Charles, this is a nice
let's
clean
look around
shot.
here. This is the bench room. And I've asked Sam to keep the camera up so you don't see all the trash underneath our benches. And this is one room of the school. And we have up to 6 workstations we can create here, depending on the class. We'll come back here, but I just want you to see the lay of the land here. We come through here, there's a little kitchenette. This used to be a living space. This is, show the windows over there.
Mhm.
This is a, what's called a daylight basement. And it was an in-law suite, I think it's called, before we bought this house. So that was a living room where we just were. This was a kitchen. And this is a machine room. We make all the debris and all the noise. And this was a few small bedrooms that I tore out to create this space. It's not real big, but it's big enough that I have just the tools are chock-a-block all around the perimeter. And this island is used for everything. And that's the school. That's the whole thing. 2 rooms. By the way, we used to the American School of Lutheran sounds like really something, doesn't it? It has been in the past. When we moved to Portland, we downsized almost to the point of I feel retired compared to what we were doing. I continue to use the name American School of Lutheran because it's mine and I am teaching. But there's no campus, there's no staff, there's no, it's Charles in his basement. So, if you want to do the real thing, there's Brian Gallup's there, doing it just great. And, that's what I would recommend. But so this is what it is. But this is also my man cave, and boy, am I happy to be down here.
So you're going to give us the lay of the land?
Yeah.
Can I start pointing out things I'd like to talk about?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a combo mill lathe off in the corner there? Like
I do.
yeah, back in there.
Yeah, you want to take us over there?
You want to go?
Can we
Do
talk
that?
about that for a minute? We just did a thing with Dan on mills and lathes and combo lathes, but that looks like a pretty big example of a combo lathe or combo mill lathe.
Well, I know a few machinists, and I've had machinists come through here as students, and they're very polite. But it's a toy to them, and but yeah, it's certainly more than I know what to do with. It's most of it's wasted on me simply because I don't aspire to use much of it. I hardly ever use the mill. This whole head moves up and down. That's the mill, and this the tool post here for the lathe is mounted on the mill table.
Mhm.
And so anyway, it is what it is. I do very little on this, but boy, the things that I do, I don't know how I would do them otherwise. One simple thing that I do, which might be useful to other luthiers. There's a way that you all know of routing for bindings, routing for trim that uses a bearing right beneath the cutter, and the bearing is undersized by an amount in terms of their radii that's equal to the depth of cut you want to make. And that's nice, but bearings aren't available in every size you could imagine, and so there's a little compromise necessary, or wrapping tape around them or things like that. But what I've always done, let's see if we can find it over here. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna take something out of here. Hard to get out of here now with this jig in the way, but here we go. So what I've done, instead of using just bearings, I use a standardized bearing, and then I on the lathe, I can make a sleeve for it to the thousandths, you know, and so we have things like this, and we're not just limited, to the jumps in sizes, from standard bearings of one to another. So that can be done on a lathe. If you have a standardized bearing, you pick one that has an outer diameter equal to a drill size, and you just the lathe first bores a hole in an oversized piece of this material. I think this is I'm not sure.
Is that like HDPE?
Couple of different materials I've used, but at any rate, just bore that hole, and then as you need these, just turn a section to that diameter and cut it off, and we make it a press fit, obviously, but yeah, it's just so easy. You don't need anything like that rig. The most modest, cheapest lathe would do that. That's just machining 101. Another thing well, let's see. Just to put so I do have bearings, and it does look as though they're almost available in every size, but and yeah, maybe I'm just being a little picky, but that's how we go about it. So we do that on a lathe, and it's not unusual for me to put a piece of wood on the lathe. It is it's a metalworking tool, but I may need a plug for something or whatever. It's handy to have it around.
Charles, what's
something like what we just talked about here, you could do it on a drill press. Good. So,
speaking of drill presses, what do you have chucked up into that drill press? Is that a fly cutter or a safety planer or hole saw?
Is it possible does that volume go up at all?
I think I've got about as much as I can get on it. I'll try to keep the camera close so you can.
No, what this is it's a sanding disc.
Okay.
It's a slug of steel, galvanized steel, and just turned true. This was made by John Gilbert. Famously built his guitars with little more than a bandsaw, drill press, a Wagner safety planer, type of mill, and this tool to finish things off. And I can dimension things and clean up flat joints and things with. I do a million things with this. I've just they come flat, and I don't know that they're available anymore. I'm going to start making these and selling them. There's just so much we can do with them. But they came flat, but I just turned the first half inch of this down, just hardly at all, just so a piece can get started, underneath it. This is more interesting to me. That this is there to guide some pieces if they fit that dimension. But that brings up the value of this. Lots of drill presses do have a removable slug like this, just so that you can drill through holes and not have, ragged fibers on the downside. You can back it up without having to put it on a block or something to support, the underside fibers. But that's what they're there for. But once it's there, oh my God, the things you can do with it. Take a look at this. These are all things that fit in that square, Just the 1/4-inch pin is something that allows me all kinds of drilling opportunities. Let's say here's something where I have reason to bore 4 holes. I won't go in.
Uh-oh. Is it me or?
Uh-oh.
But so I have a those holes, bang, 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 always in the same place. This is not unlike a pin router in a sense, but yeah, it's a pin drill. Do 100 things with that.
We lost.
Also, this is what all these cabinets look like when you open them up. In fact, this one's got a little space,
Uh-huh.
See, there's more. And well, anyway, there's more and more and more. Let me show you. Do you want to just see a couple things that we can do here? Because I've
Sure.
said it's magical, and
Sure.
so let's not walk away from it immediately. Okay, let me be over here.
Yep.
Hey, Sam, we're getting some internet drop out there. I don't know if you can like raise your right hand towards the sky or anything, but
You want me to pray to the internet deity? Yeah,
If
I
you
think
could-
we're on
if you could do
Wi-Fi.
that, yeah.
I don't know. There's a whole lot I can do, but
okay.
Oh, well,
Are
we
you
can look for a place in the room where it's better and just
No, it's okay.
Do things there.
Let's tough it out on the drill press. I want to see the cool drill press stuff.
okay. Let's see. So here's a very specific. This is only for one task. There's an acoustic guitar is typically a cross brace on the soundboard, cross brace above the sound hole, and it's not unusual for there to be a hole drilled through that. It's access for the truss rod wrench. So we take that piece, it's a piece of brace stock, which has the 25-foot radius on it, and this has the 25-foot radius as well. We put it up here, and that piece is about this long, and so we don't have to have a center line or anything. And this pops it right in the right place, having always, centered the quill on this spot. So just little things like that. I don't know if I can explain this well, but there's on our rim, right, the sides, where they wrap around the neck block, there are 2 bolt holes that will go through the neck block and, bolts into the heel. Well, the sides, when they're bent, but before we glue them together to the blocks, we slide the heel end in here, and we have 2 marks on it telling us where those bolt holes are going to be. We line the marks up here, and this drills a half hole. And so you get a half hole in each of the 2, say, rosewood, pieces along that seam. It's a little thing, but it looks nice. And it's just, it's easy.
Are there magnets in that?
There are not magnets. What was the magnets before?
Oh, I just thought to
What are you thinking?
snap it into place. I just thought in the void in the drill press table. I thought that, but it looks like actually now that I look at it, they're just.
Oh no, these are leveling.
Yeah.
Screws. Yeah.
So the
Let's see. I'll just show you one or two more and be done with it. Fender headstock tuning holes. Okay. So 6 in line. We mark them on the on the drill. I'm sorry, on the headstock itself, and then we might line up those marks with this and just pop it. This is for the 10 millimeter hole that's half an inch from the edge. So
cool.
they don't wiggle, they don't bury, they're all just locked a half inch, just running it along here. So again, simple stuff. We all do it some way, it's nothing we don't do, but it just makes it so easy.
When,
I'll go on.
when-
Well,
how long does it take you from the time that you think that you can make something like that to making it? Do you do it almost immediately, or do you have to fuss with it the old way for a while before you finally throw your hands up and take the time to make the fixture?
It doesn't come immediately. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer the question.
But for me, it's always like, should I make a jig for this? And I always have to like weigh it against, but I could do it this way with double stick tape for, 3 more years.
Well,
Oh, that's awesome.
so yeah, you can see the value of that. If you didn't have something like that, the bolts on the other end of the shaft of this would hold the cutting surface up above the table, and so you'd be on a block or something. It just takes care of business. Now I haven't attached this to my dust collection system, but it's built into the base here that that's part of the scheme. So one day it'll just all draw down there instead of all over the shop. But so yeah, there's more and more. I'm not going to spend the day on just that thing, but there are also larger setups like workboards with many pieces that have one of these mounted on the bottom to simply set the whole thing in the right place for the quill and get on with things. So one day I'll write an article or something about this, or we can have a little afternoon with Charles and his drill press, and
Yeah.
only those people who are want to be there we'll do that to them.
This
But,
falls
anyway.
this falls in line with what you were talking about in terms of standardizing your workpieces so that you can move the work along. You know what I'm saying, in terms of refining your building process to make steps easier on yourself. And
Right.
and how it goes hand in
Yeah.
hand with trying to teach it in the most efficient way, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What Doug's referring to is my principle. Maybe that should be a word for it, but in my practice is to standardize anything that can be standardized without inhibiting the creative dimension of the craft. For instance, all of my guitar shapes at the bottom and the top of the center line, a 3-inch section, in other words, 1.5 inches to either side of the center line, at each end, classical, small, big, any guitar, I make that 3 inches a 20-inch radius. And I found that a 20-inch radius doesn't preclude me dropping the shoulders radically or having proud square shoulders. There's no influence. But by having found that one radius that works for everything, now I can make tools having to do with those parts. And, for instance, all my neck blocks are, well, you want to see? Let's go. Let's talk about this. So one of the, these are all standard woodworking tools. And what makes them lutherie tools, of course, is, the jiggery, the fixtures that are temporarily, lent to them. Well, this is the bumper. And you've seen this, I'm sure, elsewhere. I find it just an incredibly useful thing. And I came over here with that 20-inch radius in mind. So this is how I start with a tail block. I use a 3/8 of an inch, birch ply, and because it's cross grain, I'll never split that thing with too much of a tapered end pin or something. And it really has the same gluing surface as the rest of my linings. So it works, it's fine. But it needs a 20-inch radius on it. Well, this is a 20-inch radius here. So put this on, and I just eyeball. In this case, my fingertips here are making it symmetrical. That's all it requires in this case. And then there'll be some noise here. I'll just do it. Well, let's see. Let's make sure that this is all set for that. Yeah. So now it has a 20-inch radius. And I use a 5-inch block, which is a little larger than the deepest, say, dreadnought type tail block. And so these can then be cut to length per guitar. But this is a very different thing than having every guitar be a different shape at those points and having to custom fit an end block for no good reason to that guitar's peculiar, very slight difference. So anyway, that's an example of standardizing that just pays off a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because a lot of times especially in the act of guitar building, you're spending a lot of time making pieces that you're then going to assemble. That's kind of the craft. And this is a perfect example of that. That's great.
Yeah, and yes, from what you're saying, I'm reminded that I could make a whole bunch of these, a lifetime's work, a year's worth, a month's work, whatever worth, but just have them ready to go, and I just pick one off and cut it to length, as opposed to get it together to make one for that guitar. Once they have this commonality, and I've taken it as far as I can in its generic form, then that's what I start with, and then make it, particular to the instrument, rather than starting from scratch for every part per instrument, which is, crazy.
Your neck block's the same thing, right? The neck block's the same.
Again?
The neck block is the same thing.
It's a different jig. So this jig, it also has a 20-inch radius, but it takes our neck block, which is a much larger affair. I don't know if people do this, but if I run to the other room and come back with one, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just grab one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get a good. Is the internet connection a little better now, or?
Yeah, we haven't had a problem since the first one. We just had one glitch there.
Yeah, one little glitch.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I bet your hair got in the way of the internet, Sam.
I lost my hair tie on the way over here, and I'm a mess.
But we do this early in the making of a block, and it's still just a squared block of wood. You wouldn't see any of this, but it does have this cut in it. This is for the truss rod, the extended nut. It's part of how we center, the neck on the body, and so we use that as a registration point. And again, it's just a square block, but this comes down, it all is nice and tight and everything, and we just do the same thing. This is another end block that's maybe not as confusing. Just a solid, bolt-on neck block, more conventional. No foot, no shelf, but we just clamp her down and boom, boom, boom. So
They all
anyway.
They all start with that registration slot at the bottom of them. That's your
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's essential because this curve has to be normal to the center line.
Mm-hmm.
It just can't be at all otherwise, or you have nothing. So yeah, that just guarantees that. Jig making is so much about doing things in an order that provide you with what you need to register to the jig early on, and then that's what it's about. So one thing I want to say too about jigs, and don't worry, I'm not going to take the whole day up showing jigs here, but my attitude is that the more jigs the better, I guess. But again, only for generic tasks, nothing that's model specific. And that's a very important distinction, that I try to, insist on people understanding that, because people think, oh, Jig, he's just doing the same thing, making guitars. No. This just does the things for me that perfect every time that are part of every guitar. My creative energy is left for those things about every guitar that make it worth building, that make it its own, make it unique or whatever, give it value. But so again, I stop short of what would inhibit any creativity. So, that's just fundamental to anything that I do. Make sense?
Yeah. So why spend energy doing a repeatable task that's making a square or making a radius a radius? Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, let's look at a couple other little doodads here. I set this out. This is just, everybody has seen a tapering jig on a table saw. There's nothing new there. But this is set up for lutherie, in that it's long enough for a side to be tapered before bent, and it is deep enough for a top or back to be trimmed and jointed, basically, here. And so that's all the parts right there. You top, back, and sides have a roll on this. And then you can taper the fretboard as well on this very, very easily. So it's handy. But I thought you might be amused to see a top jointed on a table saw, since so much energy is put into trying to make a plane, do it on the shooting boards and what have you. This might be useful to somebody who's had enough of that. Wrote it in there. I'm just going to wing it here. I haven't drawn any lines on here or anything, but the rings look pretty parallel to the rough edge. So we always put it against a stop here. And these guys back it up. And let's just see how this works. So as I'm doing that, I'm pressing it steadily against that wall of the channel that I'm following. The base obviously has a little rudder on it, and yeah, just because of course there's wiggle room in the slot. The thing wouldn't move freely if it was precisely sized. So I'm just up against one wall constantly, and that wall, I've examined it, prepared to true it if it weren't true, but it's true. So now we'll lay this out. We'll see what we got. So
It looked like your feed rate was pretty slow on that. Do you find that makes a more accurate cut?
my what?
Do that?
Your feed rate.
Seemed like
Oh,
your
the
feed rate.
Well,
Yeah, it was pretty
could
slow.
have been slower. I'm kind of feeling a rush, not to bore you guys. Yeah, the slower the better, of course. You don't want to burn it, of course, but the more free. I think the folks who have a lot of commitment to using a plane would argue that to have strokes like this of all the teeth on the blade, creates a surface that reflects that as opposed to a sheer surface. Again, the slower the better in that regard. But another thing, I hope you saw that. That's it. I mean, there are no gaps in that.
That was pretty slow.
Another thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is that once I cut this, I can look at the edge and tell if I'm parallel to the rings or not. You see this little, I don't know if that shows up. You see that right there? That's an indication of a dark ring, right? Well, if this was out of parallel to the rings, there would be a regular pattern of the rings interrupting the surface. And because there are none, I know that I'm parallel. So just something that is a handy double check. So anyway, so there you go. This is a simple tool. I also use it for any other woodworking. It is a taper jig.
Awesome.
It's definitely a luthier tool.
So you're using that to joint sides, you're using that to taper your sides, you're using it to taper
I joint the tops and the back, and I taper the sides.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So let's see. Well, here's something. This is obviously it's a spindle sander, and this is what we use to thickness, which means to reduce to make thinner. Our headstocks on our Fender type electric guitars. Maybe I can grab one here. Yeah, this still has the 4-inch width that we begin with, and so that's what this is made for. It says so right there, just 4-inch wide. And so at the point where we would be doing this, the fretboard would already be on because we're going to be rolling up into the end of the fretboard, beyond the nut. and we would have bandsawed or, pardon me, bandsawed or maybe milled the neck very close to that strong half-inch that we want it to be in the end. So we're not asking this to do much, but it's going to do all of this carving at the end, the upsweep. So we just put it in there. And the only reason I'm showing this to you is that instead of feeding this between a fence and a drum, or beneath a table and a drum, where it's trapped and you have to pull it back and reset and reset and reset, to get to your, eventual thickness. This one has a bearing strip there, a contact strip, that it's a stop. And I can loosen this and adjust that so as to create any final thickness I want. But until I get there, I'm free to just do this at any rate that makes sense to me, that feels best, and never have to readjust any setting here. I'm done when it can't take up anymore, when it hits that backside. So, that might be something you haven't seen.
Cool.
There you go.
Cool. We just had somebody in the chat say what the four
The four,
Four realms.
the four realms: acoustic, structural, functional, and aesthetic.
There you go. Somebody took good notes.
That was
Who do I have to thank there?
Florian. Florian, you want to unmute really quick and take credit for that?
Yeah, it's Florian from Austria, from far away in Europe, Charles. And it's from a video you did for the Santa Barbara Acoustic Instrument Celebration, which I find really cool. And that's where you talk about these issues. It's fantastic. So I know it.
Florian, thank you so much.
You're most welcome,
Isn't that
Charles.
incredible that an old man in Portland, Oregon, can't find his words, and a delightful, sympathetic person from the other side of
Vienna,
the world,
Austria, from the other side of
in
the
real
world.
time. In real time. That's
It's
just
amazing.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you very, very
You're
much.
most welcome. You're most welcome, Charles.
By the way, you mentioned that video, Florian. I had a student in a class just this last week who said he saw that video and he really liked what I was saying about tapping. He didn't get the irony of that at all.
I thought it was really
wonder
funny.
if that's generally the case, that people think I'm really being serious there. But anyway.
No, I did get the irony right away. I thought it was very funny. Really, just shot, with the very intently, tapping on the top. That was very funny.
Yeah.
I think I remember coming across that video some years ago and seeing.
Yeah, go ahead and
Yeah.
go watch it. You'll know what I mean. But it just shocks me that you have to be fairly obvious, I guess, these days to get a joke across. Anyway, enough about that. Give me some direction. What would you like to see? Because I know people don't have all day for this. And
No, we got some time.
I don't want to waste any time.
Charles, do you have something kicking around there that's really exciting you, that's new and got you or do you have something that's in development that you're thinking is going to be the next good
Hey,
widget?
Charles.
Yeah.
Charles, why don't you show them the safety plane sled? I always think that's a fantastic little jig.
Oh, for the next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm about to adjust everything to put the safety planer on here. and I realized I'm reaching for something that might be of real, very real value to everyone. When a drill press normally has a quill stop here that's pretty sketchy, and you wind up dialing things up and down, and it takes forever and it's all trial and error to get a specific, setting. I got really sick and tired of that. So I took it off and I replaced it with a half 20 rod. That means it's a ½ inch diameter and 20 teeth per inch. Well, that is a rod, the same rod that's used on a Bridgeport mill for the same purpose. And a Bridgeport mill is so popular and it's been around so long that there's a real healthy aftermarket for accessories and upgraded items. And so quill stops are among them. So let me show you this thing. I bought 2 of these quill stops. Again, they're for the Bridgeport mill, but it's anything that goes up and down, obviously. And they have speed buttons on them. Now, speed buttons are something we see on common drill presses these days. And that allows you to just depress that. It disengages the teeth, and you just put it where you want it and then fine tune it from there. That saves a lifetime, probably a year of my life has gone into fooling around with those things. So there's that. But the neat thing about this is that these guys have 50 equally spaced, marks around their circumference times 20 per inch, 50 times 20 being 1,000. Guess what I have here for precision? Thousandths of an inch. And now I got a drill press,
Yeah.
Wow. And so if I'm taking something with this, something I've milled, I'm now milling off the mill marks and taking it to its final dimension. I can take that last pass at maybe 1,000th or 2, if that's what I want to do, and be absolutely on the money. So thousandths of an inch, you can do it too. Everybody will have something to create, or some modification. I know I did a lot of filing here or grinding to make room for this. Anyway, but you can do it. You're luthiers, for crying out loud. So if you can make a guitar, you can certainly, do that. Okay, so let's take this. Oh, I'm going to show them this thing too. Okay. This in here. Yeah. So I'm going to get the mill. And this is the original Wagner safety planer. I have a couple of them here, but is this a popular thing among the people who are in our little company right now? The
Sure.
safety planer?
Yeah.
Yep, I got one.
We
Am
can
I
totally take some.
introducing this or just showing you something you're familiar with?
Yeah, but not very many people know how to tune one up. I know I don't. It came with that little wheel. Do you have any tips for
Oh, how to
getting those?
sharpen one?
How to get them in good shape? Like,
You want to know how to sharpen it?
yeah,
Is that it?
yeah.
Okay, well, what David was asking is, how we use it here. And
I'll
show you
we
then
can
how
do
we
that.
sharpen it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a few here, I mean, again, like you said, Doug, earlier, in 50 years, you collect a few, or David was saying, after 50 years, you know, you're going to have a bunch of tools. So I have a number of these, which means I don't have to sharpen quite as frequently.
That tool,
Just in case we're introducing this to somebody, this has 3 cutters on it. These cutters are high-speed steel, not carbides. And the idea is that as a result, you can sharpen them yourself in your shop. And they're each held on with a little cap screw here. And there's, I don't know if you can focus on this, but each one has maybe in the light, I don't know. Each one has a little mark that you align the tip with when you put the blade back on after sharpening it. And the deal is that puts the diameter or circumference of this, I guess you would say, is a 64th out beyond this. So in one pass, this can never grab more than a 64th of material. That might be your thumb, or it might be, you know, a block of ebony. But that's one of the reasons it's called a safety planer. The other thing is that in use, it has this little shoulder that comes out over it, and it would be difficult, you know, to get beneath it if that's engaged. So safety planer. These people went out of business just as luthiers were beginning to pick up on this tool. So, you know, Stu Mack and a few other people at the same time went to China to have an alternative, you know, to copy it, really. And,
I think.
Sorry.
Robbie O'Brien has a guy down in Brazil who's making them really nicely now.
Yeah. That this is what that looks like. That's from Brazil. And
Holy moly!
I don't know, man. I think if he could have got 8 on there, he would have. You know.
More is better.
You know, let's see. I'm gonna lower the table now. This is also such dead time. I realize.
Oh,
I haven't motorized this lift mechanism. Yeah.
Who
I
doesn't like
certainly
watching
do
Charles
intend to
Fox work?
motorize it, girl. There are so many YouTube channels now that are just on the many uses of the DC motors that you can strip out of free treadmills. And one of the uses is to put it on a drill press and just have a switch here, up, down, you know, that'll be marvelous.
Yeah, but then I would never get any.
So, pardon me?
So, but then I would never get any exercise.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
You get enough exercise walking across your shop.
yeah, you do.
So what David was referring to is this, and we use this for 3 different neck operations. Let's just put it on one here. The peg head thickness. The peg head thickness, we set that in there, and find the other one. Come on, here it is. Okay. So there's 4 channels in this, and the things that drop into them for different operations, they're numbered. So 3 and 3, number 2 goes to number 2, and these 2 are the same height, obviously. And so the headstock goes in here like that and sits on it. Sits on those 2, and like that. And of course, this has already been done, but it'd be a good deal thicker. And we simply, bring it down to the surface where we begin, and then we run that up to keep it there, and then we just do that, and then bring it down another half. I'll be using these quill locks that I showed you a moment ago. The bottom one, I just spin it up half, get another 25 thousandths, and do that, and we just go down and down and down and mill it. We also, with other blocks in here, set it up to. These are all scarfed, scarfed headstock. So that joint right there, the end of the face that's part of the cutoff headstock, we put that in here to let's see. So peg head angle is what I'm looking for, and they're 17 degrees. Now 17 degrees sounds pretty steep, but after we taper the arm, which is the third thing that this does, it's less than 17 degrees. So peg head angle number 2, peg head angle number 1. I have a pair for 10 degrees for classicals as well, but so I don't have one, but let's just say this is independent yet of this. It would go in there like that and be held at the correct angle. So this face that has just been bandsawed roughly can now be milled, perfectly level. And by the way, cuts like that are milling operations like that can be followed by this without, removing the parts here. We just switch this real quick, and this then just takes off any mill marks, and it's like a mirror, it's just wonderful. So, okay, so there's that. And then after the headstock is glued on, we put it in so as to taper the whole arm. I won't walk you through all of that, but that all of it, of course, it's all that's what goes into this. So, David, is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, that's what I was wanting to show, because there's a few jigs you have that are multi-purpose jigs, which I think is spectacular too. So,
well, I did promise if Doug, if no one out there has these and cares how to sharpen them, I'll gladly show you later. But you want to do that now? It's fast.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, let's do this.
Do it right here.
Okay.
Okay, for that, we're going to take out.
Somebody is asking if your safety planer is perfectly level with the bed. But I missed the rest of it. Can you read that again?
It has to be, or yeah. You have to
One
create
second.
that relationship. The bed has to be level to the quill. So the original safety planer came with this. And this fits into one of the here we go. So this fits the shape. If you can see that, I don't know. Is that visible?
Mhm.
Yeah. So they give you this, and you can spend a lifetime just slowly sharpening this until it's just a little stub over here, but it still works, So when I got the Stu Mac version, this wasn't in it. And I asked Jay and a few other guys who were on a conference call looking at this. I was proposing a lot of tools that they're not going to happen. But I said, then you take this out and you use it. And he said, well, what is it? And I said, well, it's in with the safety planer, right? And he said, no, I never heard of that. So, without this, that safety planer is being sent out. The whole design of it is to facilitate people sharpening it themselves, but they can't do it without the thing to sharpen it. So I don't know how people are handling that. So this is one of those many, many slightly more complex things that has the 5-inch block on the bottom, which just sets it into the right relationship to the quill. And this is the sharpening setup. So this starts with this. It says set wheel height. The right, I may have to, oh, good. Thought I might have to dial up the table again. So we just set it to that height and lock it there. And that puts it in the right relationship to everything else. And I have this as a center just to, you can just eyeball it. And it is centered with the quill. So we'll just lock the table there so it doesn't swing around. Okay. So this block moves in and out. This is on it, and it's the right height to do that. And this back surface wants to be on the underside of this, and then you just barely do that. So that's how it starts. And boy, it just has to touch it, then the thing is done. But as you can imagine, it would be awful if a guy just didn't know where to stop pushing it. So it has also this is a stop that's adjustable. I can, loosen that and push this in and out, whatever. I think for one's drill press, this would never have to be adjusted twice, but it's there. And that's the sharpening setup. It's real fast. Okay, so enough of that. I'd like to show, now I've got this over here, the edge sander. I've got it very well buried. This is just the debris of our little fun time here the last few minutes. But if I can pull that aside, maybe one more thing I'll show you, and then, I'll show you anything you're interested in. But the only other thing I'd like you to see is the fixture that's on that. So
Is that your radius sander? Is that?
What was that, Doug?
I said, is that your radius sander?
Yes, we radius the fretboards with it.
Yeah, this I want to see.
Yep. Okay. So unfortunately, boy, if we ever do this again and maybe just have a real short little time together with one or two tools that we can go into and be of, some value to others.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that. But I didn't know really how to prepare for this. And as a result, I don't have a fretboard here to work on. So I got to figure we're all luthiers. And, one thing I've found out is that one of the greatest personal skills that one can bring to this kind of work is the ability to visualize in 3D, you know? And some guys just don't do it. And without that, they can't put together a picture from what you're saying that's accurate. And that's difficult. So I hope you can all imagine that there's a fretboard in place here. What this is, and you know, I designed this back in the 70s when I just had an explosion of creativity when I discovered that I could think a certain way that has, you know, made all these jigs and pretty much, you know, whatever little bit I'm known for in lutherie. That came to me one afternoon, actually. And I never knew I knew how to think a certain way until I did. And that's a story in itself. But this was part of that initial explosion of enthusiasm. It is for doming fretboards. Okay. Now, our fretboards all begin with 2 registration holes drilled in the underside before they're tapered or anything. And then all the tools that taper and dome and do other things hold them relative to those 2 registration holes, which puts them in a constant relationship both to the center line and the nut line in each jig. So this is a pin, this is a pin. They're just 1/8 inch pins, and they're only sticking up an 1/8 inch at most. But the fretboard, when it goes on here, it has been slotted and it has been tapered. So now we press it onto these pins, we hold it down, and this do this, yeah. This is this is all pantomime since I don't have a fretboard, but it is a vacuum tool. So if I open this, you can hear perhaps, air is being sucked out of it. And that just pulls it down rock solid to this. So, okay, so that's how we hold it on without having any clamps in the way. But what guides it are these are stops. Just take this off and look at one. This is just a surface that the pipe here rides, and the other end of, I can't twist it around now, but the other end has a little dummy piece of the same pipe coming out to ride on the other surface. And then these vertical surfaces are literally the stop. And what it stops is these guide surfaces. There's one at each end. And these are radii. I have a little, not a vast library, but anything I've needed so far. And, I have the tools to make the next one the minute I need it. But you see, I have, it says 12 and 12. For this last class, we made some fretboards, and we made cylindrical fretboards. But this is this can make what people refer to as compound radius, conical fretboard. You simply have to determine the 2 end conditions. Anything can be put anywhere in a seamless board. So to use it is to do this, right? That's it. That's the whole thing. Takes no time at all. These stops, of course, can be adjusted. These are the ones I made in the 70s, and they just won't die. These days I would have some kind of a lead screw on here to give it some controlled adjustment back and forth. But apparently I can't throw them out. They work. So I have little lines here that I use, but they can be variously adjusted so as to create a tapered fretboard, which is something with some classical guitars, particularly. I mean, we're in this day and age, most classical guitars are based in North America, at least to seem to be based on the Hauser model, and a tapered fretboard, is not an unusual thing if that's, that's what you're building. So we can do that. Yeah, we can do a lot of things. So what else can I tell you about this?
So for you to adjust
Maybe
your
that's it.
just a matter
Maybe
of-
that's it. Yeah.
So for you to adjust your radius on that is just a matter of just changing the shoes on either end.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
That's
Now,
fantastic.
Thank you for bringing that up. It caused me to look at this again, and I realized the one thing I do want to emphasize here that might be news is that, oh, I imagine it's not, but I've never read an article on conical, compound radius fretboards, and I've read many others, but I've never read an article that doesn't discuss it as a matter of what radius at the nut and what radius at the other end. And no mention of the saddle, no mention of the right hands, being favored in the process.
Thank you.
This is a 25.5-inch radius. This is the saddle. This is the nut. These two guys are right beyond, I should say. So my question is never, what do I need at the other end of the fretboard? My question is, what radius is going to serve the left hand at the nut? And what radius is going to serve the right hand at, the pick or the fingers, which are two very different things. If it's fingers, well, we might want something a little flatter than with a pick. At any rate, there are separate considerations, and they can be made, distinct from one another. And then, depending on what your choices are, it's always going to be flatter at this end. And so this is going to become flatter. Of course it wants to be flatter there. That's how the fingers work. Up here, it wants to be as tight as can be, I would say. But, depends on, who it is and what they want. But frankly, I'm making some electric guitars now that go beyond this sacred 7¼ inches that we're all told about as, real tight. 6 inches, 5 inches. You should try it. It doesn't look or feel radically different. It's just better, playability wise. But at any rate, just think about that. It's the saddle and the nut, not the nut and the end of the fretboard that are the cone in question. After all, the strings make it down to the saddle. And this is all about a perfect underpinning to the strings. The string paths are everything on the conical fretboard. That's why it exists and why it works so well. So I'm not here to sell you on conical fretboards, but if you get into it, forget your math, and trying to calculate this, if this is this. It's all about the right hand on this end. So, okay?
Absolutely, yeah. That's something.
Okay. Well, we can let that thing go. I don't know what else. Hey, you've probably heard more than enough of Charles Fox by now, huh?
Well, I think we can.
I'll be back.
I like the idea of coming back for a deep dive on one tool. I'd rather wait and do a deep dive on one tool at a later date than do a cursory examination of 100 tools right now, because I think there's a lot of meat on a lot of those bones.
There is. I wonder if if we might be getting to the end of this. I'm just thinking of the things I've mentioned or promised or given you reason to anticipate. You want to take a look at the benders? We can take a look at the new bender that's coming out.
Yeah, let's take a look at the new bender.
Yeah, why don't
Hey,
we
Charles, have Sam take a quick shot up at your buffing machine up on the ceiling.
Oh yeah, I was noticing that earlier.
Well, the buffing wheel, this is just for lacquer. The buffing really requires a lot of space, and this is the only place in the whole shop that I've got it. But I don't have any space to have that permanently parked down. So it just swings down, and the wheels are just right here when I do it. But, I've had that buffing jack, which means pardon me, the shaft, the nuts, and the pulley, whatever, and the pillow box, the bearings. I've had that forever, and in different shops and different for different reasons. It's been up on welded frames. It's been hung from the wall, from 2x4s. It's been a lot of things. And when I came here, there was no place. As a matter of fact, you might feel, a lot of people have said, "Wow, this is kind of a luxurious." I've got two, large enough rooms. It is a lot of room, but still, I don't have anywhere to have a permanent, dedicated workstation for a single task. I don't. There's not. I like the buffing wheel is not set up just waiting for me to come to it. There's no room for anything like that. I've set up a number of small, factory-like setups, and boy, it's frustrating. It was frustrating when I got here to realize I couldn't do that anymore. But anyway, so that's an example of just having your cake and eating it too, I guess.
Well,
So let's go to the other room and we'll take a look at the new.
I was really hoping you weren't buffing your guitars over, like, by holding them over your head.
Actually, that might be highly ergonomic.
Doug was hoping you
never
weren't
know.
buffing, just holding them up to the ceiling. Yeah.
That
I
could
can save a
work.
little time by doing that. Actually, what lowers that, Doug, is a winch from Harbor Freight, the cheapest winch they sell.
Mm.
If that thing ever came loose and you were in its way, to cut you in two.
Oof.
So, yeah, that's fun. So we'll go over there and look at that. But on the way, I see a couple other things that I set up. I think Doug or Dave or somebody mentioned vacuum. They'd like to see some of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the vacuum pump, I think you know what a vacuum pump is. It's in another room. This is the main line, from the vacuum pump, goes down under the table, and it spreads to the four corners. And each of the four corners has two or three, but mainly two valves. And the rear valve pulls air out of this hole. So there's one of those at every corner. And then the front one pulls air from this chuck here, body chuck. Oh, I'll show you how they work. So this guy, this is just two pieces of MDF. The bottom piece has a simple, routed circle here that we put this rubber seal into. This 1/4-inch hole is what the router spins around, a pin, obviously. But now it's where the air is drawn in there, and then it's two pieces. So one of these pieces also has routed X from the center to each of these pods. And so when we put this anywhere over that hole and pull it, there's air now pulling at each of these. So if we, and of course, without them being sealed, this thing is just, just free. But once we put this on, that's not going anywhere. Nothing's going, it's all locked,
Sure.
So there's the minute that the rim gets the top and the back, the minute the box is closed, it lives on this. You should know, of course, that we build a rigid rim, so it doesn't stay in a mold, through those operations. The rim is a thing, and so there are a lot of operations we could do that we couldn't do if to a rim that was still in a mold. So at any rate, it lives on this, as I said, and we can sand, we can scrape, we can do whatever we want, but we can route for the binding, for the trim, and then we can install the trim all on this thing. And there's no clamps in the way at all. And it is elevated for any clamps we might want to use. It's just lovely. I like it. So
Fantastic.
there's that. Now the front here, I'll just keep, I don't know why I'm using this instead of one with a top on it, but it doesn't matter. Let's turn this on. Now that thing is locked on there. And, there's work that goes on here, fitting the neck to the body, and it's a nice way of holding it. Now, I'm not saying that this is better than a vise. I have such a vise in the room where we just were, and I would always use the vise. But out here, there's no room to have these vices. Have to be as long inside as the body, on its side. There's just no room to have them here. So we've always used these, but don't be enticed by the magic and use a vise. It's a lot better. These things can fall off if you do the wrong thing. For that reason, though, we have a shelf that pulls out here, and I just put those shelves in one day because it was obvious that we needed it. People were dropping these off here, by overworking it or working it sideways and just kind of peeling it off. But I realized that a smart person who foresaw this could have built, and this is what you should do if you want to do something like this, a cabinet that has slots every inch. And however you want to orient this thing, you can slide this safety shelf right beneath it. And which I have yet to do, but that's how it should be.
Someone asked if and these are cut from length, not one continuous. It's not one solid piece. The seal is cut from length.
Oh yeah, they're just butted. Yeah. These by the way, these are just on some polyethylene tubing. Just like the other tubing we use in the shop. And the reason that I use that, it's stiff enough to hold them upright, but it's flexible enough to conform to the contours of backs or tops. Just right. They work like that. The first one I built, again, back, in Vermont, had metal, universal air hose kind of swivels on them or something. It did the same thing, but just, no need for that. It's perfect. And this, again, this is just a piece of birch ply. You start with a sheet of it and you drill the holes. Then you go around with a router that sticks in each one of the holes and routes this. And then you go around with a hole cutter with a 1/4-inch pilot and pop each one out. And then you just hold it up against a sander or something, and it's done. The holes are a stepped hole so that this doesn't just pop right out the top. Same thing on the other end. So there you go. That's it. What this is for, by the way, and this will be it for there's more vacuum, but that's another day. But this is out. Now, what this is for, this is a 12-inch radius dish. Actually, it's a 24-inch disc, which is what we use always. You might show that down there. It's just a little library of dishes. And we've trimmed off 2 edges. You'll see in a moment why. And I've set this out to be just right for the smallest guitar that I make conventionally. And then any larger guitar can fit out over it. But the point is, if anything is exposed like that, it won't seal. So it has to cover. And this is one of those smaller guitars. So I'll just put it on. Yeah. Now getting some, leakage right there. Okay. Make it a little smaller. I have smaller guitars in mind to be making very soon, and this won't be small enough. But at any rate, there it is. Now, if you can imagine just the back itself, braced and ready to install, but not attached to this. This doesn't exist. Just the back is there. You can imagine that the back is being pulled into the true 12-inch radius spherical shape that we intend it to be. And then we take the rim and we place it on it like this, and then with wood clamps, we clamp it on, and that's how we install it. The conventional way, is more often than not, the rim is in a mold, the back is placed over it, and you're going to get as close to approximation as you can, and that's usually pretty good. But we got a sphere, and it satisfies the eye a little more. Where that shows up is, highlights on when the finish is buff. The highlights, it is a sphere, and it's delightful. And then we take this off, and it is then now what we have here. We call it the boat, and the boat put aside. The top is placed down in another one that has a 25-foot radius, a gentler radius, and then the boat is clamped down in the same way to the top. So the top is again itself is held in that full 25-inch radius sphere. I'm on my way to 30-inch for the tops, by the way, but yeah, that's that. Very nice. I mean, I like the results. Obviously, I do it, but yeah, it's very satisfying. So,
Charles, hi. What do you seal the MDF with for the vacuum
I
tooling?
was just asking, is it the same stuff that you're using on your bench tops?
yeah, and you know what it is? It's anything that I can find in the hardware store that says clear, dries fast,
Uh-huh.
and you can wash it's water based. You can wash your brushes. I don't care what it is. I don't know.
I don't
Could
stay.
be urethane, could be anything. I don't. It doesn't matter. I know that makes me sound like an idiot, but
No.
I'm a simple man, and I can only handle the things that do matter. So it's important that I figure out what doesn't matter. Anyway, this is the StewMac bender, and it's entirely recognizable, I hope, to anyone who's familiar with the bender as it's been since the 70s. But LMI stopped selling the Fox type bender and had one designed that's open frame like this. And once that was in the world, StewMac, and I think they're right, felt that that's just too compelling a product look to try to sell people a wooden box. So that's what we did. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm a weak man, but this is a highly manipulative. No, just making what people want, of course. But yeah, I don't know what to say about it. It has, Dan, you'll recognize this. It's just more of the same, thanks to Dan and his setup rig. StewMac has an abundance of this, apparently, so we designed around it.
Yeah.
And it does have, none of these, there's nothing new here really, except the way it's put together, but this is a good heat controller. And Yeah. I don't know what to say.
It's
uh,
really
it's
it's
nice.
really cool. Brock demoed it during our Christmas party, and
Ah.
it was really encouraging to watch. I
Oh,
worked
great.
I worked at
Great.
Breedlove back in the day when we were using your benders that still had light bulbs in them.
Wow.
We moved on from light bulbs after during my time. I think
Uh-huh.
we moved up to heat blankets, but yeah, we were still using the light bulbs in 2001.
That's funny. Well, the truth is about this that I'm thinking about the light bulbs here.
I think it was great.
Well, yeah, but they char. You
Yeah.
know, parts get charred, and that's not a product. I mean, that's not even a thought out design. See, we were hippies up in the woods of Vermont. That's all we had was light bulbs. We didn't know from heat blankets and things. So, and then we did, and here it is. But yeah, the on that subject of different elements of the bender being used and other being forgotten sometimes or ignored or just mismatches of things that are only there because of something else that's no longer there. When I designed this, I'm not going to say I gave it to the world. That sounds so magnanimous. I just let it be, and I'm delighted that the world has found use for it. But because I didn't have, oh God help me, probably because I didn't have a financial interest in it, or I had to eat and do other things. I didn't wash my hands of it. I use it every day, and I've always been happy to make some for people who contact me. But basically, I didn't follow it out into the world as its champion. I didn't tend to it and, make it my responsibility to have it go right. And this is what the harvest is. Everything that's available commercially like this and everything that people I've seen build are kind of a pistache of, various elements. If the thing, and I'm not referring to myself here, but if the thing has any genius, it's that you can do almost anything to it and it still works. That amazes me.
Yeah.
But that's our good fortune. But at any rate, yeah, this is up to date. For instance, it used to be that these forms there were three pieces and they had dowels over them, and the dowel holes were tangent to the edge. And actually, no, it was just two pieces. That's right. Because there had to be room for the light bulbs in between them. And so the steel and the side were unsupported, but for those dowels. That's why they had to be right out here at the edge.
Yep.
And so you had this big thing to put somewhere. And if you wanted to change its shape, which is part of the art of this thing, seeing how your body or your side, your pattern springs back, and then judiciously, gradually, deepening the curves to, make up for that and have it spring back into its desired shape. Well, you couldn't do that if these metal rods are right out here in the edges. You can't change it. So anyway, but a lot of people are still doing that, and they're not using light bulbs. They have no idea that that's the only reason that was being done. So that's unfortunate. Those people are less free to tune it,
I think
but they don't know that. So it's all my fault in just, letting it go on its own. And I want to make up for that. And that's partly why I was interested in this project with Stu Mack, is that it might allow me to put the word down. Here's what it is. Here's what it does. Here's why it is. Here's what you're invited to do in your craft as a result of it. Here's how to exploit it, and here's how a side is bent with it. Because I see so many of these videos where, oh my God, they go through all these stages in the bending of the side, and this is a separate unit here, and then right about here, I adjust the heat. Oh Lord, it takes 90 seconds to bend a side, and that's that. So, people are, it'll be good information.
Yeah.
So long as people aren't stuck on their way just because it's their way, I don't care really. But anyway,
I also think
maybe that's something, Doug. I don't even know if it will. I don't know if I will be doing that through STUMAC. It'll be news to me if I am. So maybe that's something we can at least get on tape in one of these sessions.
Oh, yeah, we would.
I'll just bend the damn side and be clear about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So
Yeah, that would be great to do. We'd love to do a bunch of those things. And I think I think it's worth mentioning as far as the bender is concerned, how many times it's been called, obviously, the Fox bender, and to realize also that this didn't exist before you. And a lot of us nowadays kind of take it for granted as younger people come up in this business that it's always existed. But one of the things I think it's also important to point out about it is that the real name of it is the Fox Universal Side Bender.
that's
And
true.
I think, the more important aspect of it is that you can use it to bend any shape if you're using it properly.
Right. That's very important to state, because that was the inspiration for the whole thing. I had students bending on the hot pipe and breaking sides, and the class back then, before this existed, would just fall apart completely at that stage, and I'd have to wind up bending all the sides. So I invented this, but I wanted the students to have all the sureness and solidity and confidence and security of a factory press, a guitar side press, but not have the limitation of it being model specific. That was the key. Any of these big pneumatic presses that you've seen, they work like a charm, but only for an L5, or whatever. This thing, I'm telling you what you know, but these are endlessly interchangeable, and it's the work of a moment to do that. So, yeah, that's that. I wanted people to, but this may sound really, I don't know, full of myself, but I have since the beginning wanted to serve the craft and be worthy, of being part of it, really. And yeah.
Hey, Charles, why don't you go over to the other bench and just show the precursor to that, the shop built versions without the steel pieces?
Sure. This is the bender that I continue to use. This is what I sell, and it works. It works great. The thing about it that might be unusual to folks who've seen, most of what's out there, is that this opens up to remove the bent side, which is the only value I can see of an open type model, like what the LMI and what we just saw there. It's very awkward to get a bent side out of here if it has to be pulled out, in one direction. Often all these come out as well, but these, maybe I can just make a point of this, that this is no longer a big unit. It's just, a set of 3 pieces that are just set in there, and there's here, let's take this out. I'll just lay this down. But this is what they are. So, they just drop right out. There's the rod here, which the protruding ends of which on either side are for the cutaway arm when it's used to hook over and bear on. But it continues clear across. And so if you look in there, you can see it's a registration point for the bending forms. And all of this is on the low point of the waves. That's the critical line to understand if you make any of these yourself. That. So, it's easy enough to remake them, alter them. You can build them up, anything you want to do. But it's just so, and you can see the library here. If those were the former big monoliths, it would be, I'd have a separate shed for them, I guess, or something. But anyway, yeah, this is the deal. So,
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to come back.
is that about it?
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to come back and do some afternoons in the shop with.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get
Please.
the camera for a wrap up here.
Switch back to the computer.
Yeah, let me find it really quick.
Oh, there's latency.
There we go.
No.
There we go.
Hey, this has been fun.
It's been a
It's
lot of
been a
fun,
lot of
Charles.
fun, Charles.
Ooh, we got an extra mic on, Sam.
I turned it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Charles,
So-
I can't.
Hey guys, if and I don't know how many guys are out there, guys, girls, whatever. If you do have any questions, is there a way that that's facilitated, or?
Absolutely. We could put a section up on the website for like a Q&A afterwards if anybody has any questions, and I can make
I'd
sure
be
that
a lot, I have to say that I think you'll believe that my spirit is to be helpful always, but I'm the worst thing with email. I just hate it.
yeah.
And at my age, you start valuing every day and every minute of every day. And I got more important things to do unfortunately, than to be polite, it seems. That's awful. But so if it can be live, if people can just ask me a question, I'd be delighted to answer as fully as I can, but then it's over.
Yeah, I mean, if before we wrap up today, if anybody who's with us has any questions, by all means, shout it out. But what I'd like to do is be able to take advantage of your good nature and invite you back preemptively
Yeah.
so we can do some like afternoons in the shop with Charles, to actually do some tooling and some side bending and some of those things where we pick a specific tool and just do a deep dive on it. And
Well, I'd be happy to do that to the degree that there's general interest. For some people, I'm an acquired taste, and I fully understand that. And there's a point where you've had enough of Charles Fox.
well,
So-
I can pretty much speak for almost anybody who's with us and anybody who's in the group that would be a very, very high threshold to reach. For most.
Well, let me show you.
Can I just say, just as a thing for the group, I've been through Charles's classes and I've built a number of his jigs in my shop. So if anyone has any questions when he's not around, I'm on Zoom all the time and I can answer
David's the
the
man.
questions about the things that I've built. So
Yeah. Hey, by the way, David Trussman is what the real thing looks like when it comes to generosity of spirit. Period.
I agree.
Yep. So,
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that.
Can we have everybody on mute and thank Charles? Or did anybody have any questions or?
I just wanted to say one thing, Charles. I was in your class back in 1983. You changed my life. I'm still in this. I do repair. Thank you. It's
There
good
we
to hear
go.
you again.
Thank you for just being there doing what you're doing, Lou.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
hey, check in now and then. You know, you
Okay.
still call me anytime.
Okay.
need it.
Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks.
I would like to thank you, Charles. The time I spent with you in California was so special to me, and it changed my life. I became a jig maker. I went home and bought a uniplane, and I became a better repairman. I'm not a builder, but
Uh-huh.
I really got turned on to so many ideas.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It sounded like you were about to say, I made you want to be a better man.
You already had that.
No, thank you very much. Oh, and there's somebody kindly putting my bender on in the background.
Dave Stouty. And he's got the blueprints to show it.
Oh yeah.
Prove it.
Oh yeah.
Drawn by Steve Klein. Yeah, I
was about to say that. Yeah, that was Steve Klein drew that up.
I still have both of them to make the full size. I made this back in 92 or 93 and I called you and you answered my call and I had some questions. This has got all the parts from LMI, the blue anodized parts.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And, I actually, when I was working at Taylor, I had to bring this in and bend about 60 or 70 sides for a prototype.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's tried and true.
A lot of, we think of this as, something that, independent luthiers can build and use and all that. That's our model personally. But you will find these in a number of factories, the names of which you're very familiar with, in their design and repair, or if they have a custom shop, like that. They do have a role beyond it. I think PRS, do they still make their own acoustic guitars? They did for a while. They had a room full of these things. That's all I know. But yeah. I've seen people spend a lot of money on pre-made mechanical things that come out of China, and they take more time really than this thing if you use it correctly. So there you go. Now I'm just blabbing.
Well, we're definitely going to do some side bending in the future. Charles, I cannot tell you how much it meant to me for you to do this. I can also, as a personal note, since we met last August, getting to know you as we have the countless number of times we spent on the phone has been a joy to me. That
has been fun, hasn't it?
Yes. I'm not going to stop doing just because we've done this now. So
no, please. I'd hate for this to be all there is. I think I mentioned at the beginning. My bank account goes out $11 a month for a few months now, and I had not been on this yet. So now I see, this is very much something, if I can find the time, I'll come back to. And yeah, I love what you're doing.
Yeah, this is what we're doing. So everybody, if you could unmute and join me in thanking Charles for joining us today, and let him know how much we appreciate him.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Charles.
Charles,
your time.
Thank
you.
See you again.
And a supplementary thank you
Very
to
soon.
Sam.
Very soon, I hope. Good.
Thank you, Charles.
Can we also get a thank you to Sam for taking the time to?
Absolutely.
Sam.
You did it all.
I just got to hang out with Charles all day.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, consulting you first, Dan. So what should I do? What's the best magnifiers out there?
Everyone will tell you something different, probably.
Yeah, I'm asking you. You sleep in them. What is it?
I'm hooked on, I just like the Optivisor because I've had it for so many years. I've bought other ones that are fancier and do stuff, but I like this one and I like to gang two lenses together. A number 4 and another 2.
Uh-huh.
I just connect them with some Gibson Tune-o-matic thumb wheel screws
Uh-huh.
and a piece of bent binding.
Uh-huh.
And that's how they go on. And I super glue the front up together. Usually, I didn't on this pair.
Of course you did.
And this is
Excellent.
good for up, down, this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Dan's
for
been-
wear your hair off.
Well, I thought it must be something special, but now that I know what it is, I'll just go out and get my own and I'll
Well, Dan's been known to send out signed Optivisors to people that are.
sign
Remember that,
up.
Dan? It's like
Are you a
sometimes.
dealer? Dan, of course you should be a dealer.
I'll put you together a set of Optivisors and send it to you. I'll give you the doubles just like mine.
I would want it only that, just like yours. Absolutely.
That will
Signature
happen
series.
this week, so don't go buy some.
Okay. I promise you'll hear back from me.
Hey, Joan, remind me that I told Charles Fox I'd send him some Optivisor.
Dan,
Oh.
please sign them, Dan, and sign them prominently on the outside so everybody can see that.
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
You got
And
it.
I'll just swank around the shop like someone special. you know. So, Doug,
Yeah,
you wanna?
we're gonna, we normally wait till about 3 o'clock for people to filter in.
Okay.
I don't know what time it is actually. Is it 3 o'clock yet?
It's 2:56.
Okay, we're gonna.
I've hit recording in case somebody says something super duper interesting off the cuff. Thank you. But
You want me to say that part about the Optivisor again?
oh, yeah,
You can record it?
yeah,
Got evidence now.
you got to have optimum visage.
Right. Right.